Very good evening to you all. Welcome to another Facebook Live with the Free Speech Union podcast. We have an eminent panel here this evening to share in our conversation around the Bethlehem College issue up in Tauranga. I'm sure many of you have seen coverage on a Christian school up there that has been called out for having a statement of beliefs that includes the definition of marriage being between a man and a woman. And this is an issue that the Free Speech Union has gotten involved in. And we've had quite a few of our supporters really support the fact that we are standing up for their speech in this case, but also wanting to understand a little bit more around the context. And so that's what we're here doing tonight. We're going to be unpacking the situation itself and some of the more philosophical aspects of perhaps how we've ended up in a place like this in a liberal democracy like New Zealand. But before we start, I just want to acknowledge some of the work that we've been doing and the help that we need from you as well. So you can join us in standing up for Bethlehem College's right to free speech. We're not asking you to agree or to disagree with them, but their rights to have that speech at www.freetospeak.nz. And this is where the Free Speech Union runs some of our campaigns and asks for the public to stand with us in this really core belief that we have that Kiwis should be allowed to disagree. Kiwis should be allowed to express themselves openly and put themselves out there for debate through free speech. So that's what we're about. So if you want to sign that public letter there, it's freetospeak.nz. But the panel that we have joining with us tonight are three of our fantastic Free Speech Union council members. We have Dr. David Cuman from the University of Auckland, Dr. Melissa Darby from Tauranga there itself. I think you're kind of in the heart of this with a lot going on there at the moment, and you're also from a local iwi there, Ngāti Ranganui, and political commentator Annie O'Brien.
I'm the only not doctor.
Doctor
yeah.
Annie O'Brien.
No, I'm not a doctor. I'm the only one who's not a doctor. I'm just feeling inadequate.
Neither David nor I can save your life or anything. So.
Yeah. But you're welcome to come and do a PhD with me if you want, Annie.
I think you regret that offer.
Annie, I wanted to start with you tonight because I think you have a bit of a unique perspective on what's going on here. First of all, you're a comms expert. You work a lot in kind of political commentary and way to communicate publicly. So you have a kind of quite an impressive experience in that regard. But also you come from a community that's been affected by this speech as well. You're part of the gay community, and yet you're also you're encouraging the Free Speech Union to stand on this issue. I wonder if you can unpack some of that for us.
Yeah, I think I can say that I feel passionately about my right to marry my partner when the time is right, and I am stoked that law went through. So I feel very strongly that marriage in 2022 can be between people of the same sex. However, I also strongly believe in religious rights and the religious rights to express themselves and their religion. We cannot pretend that any of the old religions, if you will, don't have doctrine and beliefs that clash sometimes with some of our modern ideas and how we've evolved as society. And they do need to be discussed at times, but on the whole, we're talking about, in this situation, the rights of one group again being pitted against the rights of another. So I guess we've seen it a fair bit in my experience with the rights of women in this situation, with the rights that are put forward by people who believe that woman is a construct and not a reality. And again, we're seeing the same similar group of LGBT activism taking exception with the rights of a religious group in this case. And I feel passionately that I can hold two beliefs and think that actually I disagree strongly with some of the stuff that Bethlehem College has said, and I disagree with their perspective, while also being prepared to defend their right to say it. That makes sense.
Well, and that's very much. I think I just have to applaud you for that position, and that ability to be able to walk with more than one thing in your hands. Often humans are not very good at kind of holding two ideas that are in tension at once, aren't they? But isn't that the famous notion around free speech? I will I may argue against your belief, but I will defend to the death your right to believe it. And that's kind of where you're coming to on this. It's quite unique in our society today.
Well, I hope that as the Free Speech Union, we are taking leadership in that way. We have people in our council from various backgrounds with various different cultural, religious identities and sexual orientations and all those things, all those demographics. And consistently what we are doing is referring back to a principle of free speech and saying that no matter our various beliefs and positions and demographics, we are putting forward an idea that in society has been one of our very most important, which is that humans should be free to speak their minds without interference of the state. And I hope that in this campaign and in all of our others, we're setting that example to say this is what we should be doing.
It's interesting. I want to pick up on a point that you made there, Annie, around competing rights and the fact that often, there are many rights that often do have to be navigated in concert, and there's a tension that emerges there. But there's this perspective nowadays that I think many have that there's a right not to be offended. A right not to hear speech that you don't like, a right to not have someone disagree with you. And of course, that is not a right that is in tension with free speech, because that is no right at all. Society can't function if we go around thinking that we can't have others disagree with us, we can't hear ideas we don't agree with. Dr. Cuman, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. You work in the hard sciences, which is quite far removed in many ways from free speech, which is allowing open debate really on any subject from any perspective. But I wonder, kind of, how do you see this tension emerging between what are legitimate rights that we recognize, but also kind of the creation of new rights that don't really exist or haven't until very recently existed?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start with that first premise of yours. I don't think that the hard sciences are immune anymore from this sort of discussion. And the furor over the Listener 7 article, I think, is the best example of that most recently.
You're absolutely correct, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the work that we did together in standing up for their right to express their opinions. And I think there's unfortunately going to be a lot of work still to do on that front, and in the academy more generally, unfortunately, both in the hard sciences and elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that they are new rights per se. I think that they're people who want to have the right to shut down the views that they don't like, and so claim it unfairly or unjustly or without good grounding as a right. And it's the time that we live in, where human rights seems to be the paragon of virtue that everyone appeals to do whatever they feel like doing. But if we bring it back to our history, Annie put it out very nicely, the idea of a tolerant liberal society means that you have to agree to disagree and be tolerant. And those, I think, are the virtues that we are espousing as the Free Speech Union and should continue to.
Well, and I really wish I didn't have to do this, but I feel like I need to ask you what you mean by that word, tolerant, because I don't think actually, well, I'll put it the other way. I think a lot of people misunderstand what that word means. Even a lot of people, the Free Speech Union and some of our staff have come under incredible pressure this week around the opposition to the defense that we're providing for the rights that Bethlehem College has to make this speech. And one of the reasons that we've been attacked so abusively in many cases is because they go, you are so intolerant for you to allow Bethlehem College to make the speech. It's a fundamental contradiction of terms, really. So can you quickly unpack, what does tolerance mean again?
Oh, to put up with, essentially. I will tolerate you. I will put up with you. I may not like it. In many cases, I won't like it. But I will let you be you. And if I need to stand up and counter your opinions and put forward other opinions, if I need to ridicule you, if I need to show you some facts and present that in open discussion, I'll do that. but I will tolerate your speech and your right to speech. And I think as soon as we lose that, we're in real danger, particularly if it comes from the state down. And in this instance, it is a state integrated school with a special character under law that it seems like there's a whole bunch of intolerant people who will not put up with the special character of the school. And that not only has implications for Bethlehem College, I think it has implications for all special character schools. And that I'm led to believe is more than 10% of our student population who attend. So this is a very real issue on multiple levels. And the fact that Bethlehem College has been proud of who they are and stated explicitly what they're about, openly, transparently, is the reason that they're in the crosshairs, rather. And I think that they shouldn't be living in fear, and neither should any other special character school, about speaking up.
I find it, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I find it interesting that use of the word there, that they're proud of who they are, they're proud of what they're saying. And I think kind of in the decades leading up to us, free speech has been used to really open up and explore this concept of pride. And it's interesting now, Annie, you were talking about this before, that certain segments of that proud community now would seek to use those same rights to shut other people down. But Dr. Darby, I want to just ask you your perspective here. You're an education specialist. You're based in Tauranga, but you work at the University of Waikato. What is your perspective, kind of as someone who understands how classrooms work, understands the purpose of education and education often from a particular perspective? Why do we have special character schools, and why is that an important part of kind of the educational framework and the society we're trying to create there?
Well, I mean, first of all, when I first heard of this story, I thought it was a bit of a non-story that, a Christian school has this belief. I didn't think it was particularly surprising or shocking, to be honest, but here we are. So, I mean, special character schools are set up to reflect, or to allow schools to set up sort of aims and purposes and a set of objectives and so on that reflects their particular personality, if you like, or their particular set of beliefs. So a school like Bethlehem College would therefore give them the, I guess, mandate, if you like, not for what they're saying, but to have that particular option to be able to set up the school that reflects who they are as a community. And like you said, they're very transparent about that. They haven't kind of hidden it and tried to, lure people in under pretense and then actually have something else that they want to discuss with the children there or the students there. I think what has been missing in this conversation or debate as well is the role of families in this. Special character schools give families the option to perhaps select a school that better reflects some of their values and things that they have in the home. And there are many different special character schools. They're not all necessarily of a religious nature. But I think that as soon as we remove that, I guess, freedom that they have to express themselves in that particular way, they cease being special character schools. So it's sort of.
Can you give us some examples of? So there are obviously religious schools that a large component of special character. What are some other ones?
I worked closely with one elsewhere in the country that was set up and named after a particular ancestor in this part of the country. They were, I suppose you'd call them, well, they had a particular focus on Te Ao Māori. So they were able to then incorporate elements of their history and their local place and so on in a way that they felt reflected the students and the families that were part of that school community. So, their ancestor, I believe, or the ancestor that the school's named after, I guess, marked out different parts of the particular part of the country with his giant feet. So that a lot of people wouldn't believe that, obviously, but it's something that is part of their personality. It's part of their identity as a school, in much the same way as the Christian values would be part of Bethlehem College's identity. If it's not for you, jog on. There'll be a school there for you. But I think that in the interests of diversity, it's about us providing educational options that reflect the diverse needs of our community, and Bethlehem College does that.
Well, it's really interesting that just at the end there that you go to diversity, because I was thinking how does diversity continue without allowing people to be different? Different is the essence of diversity, right? And so tolerance, as David was talking about before, and diversity go hand in hand. Are you concerned that while we're talking about one particular belief here, which of course is very telling, isn't it? It's not, there are 13 statements of beliefs there, each as ridiculous as the other in some people's interpretation. Why have we just singled out one here? But are you worried that we could actually see kind of just a cookie cutter uniform educational perspective push through our schools if we removed our special character schools and the richness that they provide?
Yes, and I think it removes, again, parental choice or family choice in the matter. And again, some of the commentary that's been coming out about Bethlehem College seems to have no consideration whatsoever of the families that have chosen to send their children to this school for a particular reason. And not all, but certainly many families, I imagine, would send them there for the particular values that they reflect in their school. And I think that that's, in a free country, that's something that people have the right to choose the sort of education, I guess, that best reflects them and the values that they hold. And I wouldn't like to see a country that pushed, I guess, one view or one way of educating. I think we've moved a lot past that to try and connect more with learners in the different contexts, be that cultural, be that religious in some cases, linguistic, a whole host of different ways that we try to connect with learners so that they can get the best possible outcomes out of education. And I think that Bethlehem College and other special character schools provide an option for families that prefer not to send their children to the local kind of mainstream, if you like, high school or primary school.
I think some of our audience will go, okay, hang on a second, you're not telling the full story there. This really isn't about the speech of the school. It's about a contractual issue. Some of you may be aware of this, and it is worth noting that the Bethlehem College became a state integrated school in 1999, but in 20 years later, in 2019, it did add a statement of belief that is now the one in question. So that's the issue, according to many people, and that's where this whole conversation has come from, according to their perspective, that it was all about the fact that the Ministry of Education wasn't consulted, and I think it's worth calling that out. But there's also, it's a red herring in many ways. I think anyone who's following this conversation can see it for what it is, not least because, first of all, the gay advocates in Tauranga who have created this issue were not aware that the Ministry of Education hadn't been consulted when they first drew attention to the statement of belief. It was simply the fact that that statement of belief was there and that the speech is being expressed in Bethlehem College there. Also, this statement of belief was added 3 years ago. If it was a contractual issue, surely that would have been the case way back when. But it kind of plays into this whole, we will jump on any little thing we can to try and shut down the perspectives of people, to not to try and disagree with them. We're fine with people disagreeing with them, and as you said, many of our council members disagree with the speech in question here, but it's about shutting down the speech. It's about censoring it so that those opinions cannot see the light of day. And Annie, I wonder if can we draw you back in on this? You and I were discussing before how you're, quote unquote, the wrong type of gay. That, there are different communities in our country that almost have privileged speech at some times. That some people can have a right to speak on some things more than others, but only if they're saying certain things, right? And
Absolutely.
So I wonder what's your experience like as a lesbian woman who is saying, hang on a second, Christian schools should be allowed to, if they want, say that marriage is between a man and a woman. It's not impacting the law. If they want to advocate for a law change, let's have the discussion. We won that one.
I'll fight them again.
Yeah, exactly. and so, but on the other side, rather than being in conflict with the religious community, often you're even in more conflict with the proud community. What's that experience like?
It's insane. It's really insane. I have a very good, very religious friend who I never thought that I would be friends with a few years ago. And he sends me often links to, batshit stuff that's happening in the media and everything. And the other day he sent me something that, you know, the woke lot were doing, and he said, "How homophobic is this?" And he sent it to me. And I was like, how am I in this situation where a seriously like evangelical Christian is less homophobic to me than people in the actual like rainbow community? And it's just gone insane. And as you say, I'm the wrong type of gay. I'm my name is Mud on the Twitter hashtags and whatnot.
Not all of them. You've got lots of fans too.
And I guess I have had the wrong opinion, according to these people, on the trans issue. And that opinion for me is based on policy and law. It's not based on like wanting any harm to come to individuals or anything. But they take my opinion on that to be wrong. So then I'm wrong across the board. So in this situation, I've already had accusations that I often get called quote unquote Uncle Tom or those kind of things, which is a highly racialized term and seems very inappropriate to level at a white woman. But nonetheless, they give it a go. And then they use terms that are kind of similar to that to insinuate that I am betraying the community that has rejected me, which is a bit weird, but and that I shouldn't be listened to, and that I am quote unquote harmful. So it's such a crazy situation. And ultimately for me, even just hearing you lay it all out, this is political. It is not, there's no part of this discussion that isn't political. Whether you're talking about what these activists have decided to point to in Bethlehem's statements, whether you're looking at why it is a Christian school and not an Islamic school or a Te Ao Māori school that have had their beliefs interrogated, every part of this is political, and it comes back to a set of beliefs that kind of the culture shaping elite in the media, in these organizations, have, that they think they have the right to impose down on the rest of society, and that they then have the right to prevent discussion and disagreement on. And we cannot lose sight of the fact that this is political through and through.
I totally agree with you, Annie. I just have something's just gone through my mind. I wonder what you think about the timing of this. Why now? What's going on? Is this something that I've missed?
It's Global Pride Month, so maybe they wanted something to kind of point to. That's perhaps one thing. The other thing is, at the moment, there is a lot of movement towards the sane in the space of some of the identity aspects of the ideologies. And so we're definitely seeing, I guess, some probably negative behaviours on both ends of the extremes, whether it's the kind of woke left or reactionary right, in regards to this rainbow LGBTQ plus rainbow, alphabet mafia space. We're seeing a lot of kind of jostling at the moment because even just today, the global body that looks after swimming elite sport, they have basically said that male transgender people who identify as women cannot now swim in women's sport, which I think is fantastic news, but of course there are others who think is dire. So what we're seeing is a real jostling because there's some reckoning is happening at the moment where beliefs that have been put forward and have been imposed, there's been no debate allowed, none of that. Some of them are being teased out now and they're not going the way the activists want. And so you'll start seeing, I think, more attempts to show how bad the world is to this particular group of people. That's just my kind of reckons.
I think it's an interesting point that you raised there, though, Annie, in terms of the response on both sides. And certainly, you know, while we're talking about the censorist tendencies of one extreme of the perspective, one community, on the other sides, frequently we engage with people who are still trying to assert that that those in this community shouldn't have their speech rights. And so I'm really concerned. I wonder if any of you have any thoughts on what options do we have left? Well, once you start, you know, a lot of people say, well, speech like this leads to more dramatic action, possibly even violence. My concern is, though, once you take the speech rights away from someone, once they're not allowed to express their perspective on really fundamental issues, sexuality and gender and the composition of our family and marriages, these are very intimate subjects. And if we can't have this open debate on either side of the spectrum, if we can't really feel like we can represent who we are, whether straight and traditional or queer and open, you know, what options do we have left? Are you concerned that more dramatic action could emerge from that?
I guess if I just jump in again quickly, what I fear is that we inherit a lot of our culture wars from the United States. And if we look over at what's happening there now, you have got, you know, we've had this kind of woke push that, especially under Biden, has got, you know, very aggressive, I guess. And now we're seeing the emergence of the reactionary right behaving in ways that I think are really antisocial as well.
Absolutely,
we just in the last week, there have been a number of occasions where, because of Pride, there have been events which, while I don't agree with them, which involve drag queens reading stories to children. I don't think it's appropriate, but that's just my opinion. Then we've had militia groups basically showing up and trying to aggressively and physically prevent the events from taking place. These are the extreme reactions that, if we do not actually have some kind of dialogue and allow society to work out, this just increases the chance of these two factions clashing. And it will be in really antisocial and I guess, harmful ways for society, where all of us in the radical middle kind of going like, hey, like, I'm pretty sure we can come to some kind of agreement where we can have kids being, each other. You know, kids can be pro everyone being themselves and know what gay is and all that kind of thing, without, you know, a bloke in fishnets reading them a book maybe, but also we cannot, you know, turn into gun-toting militia when we want to stop them from speaking. It's just becomes very ugly. And my fear is that we inevitably inherit those culture war issues here, because America is just so good at exporting their bullshit, that if we don't set the groundwork of we discuss these things here, we're going to end up with those kind of ugly factions emerging.
I think so. Speaking of your comments about America, any years ago when I was over there involved in some UN stuff, they were talking about how they ever got the Universal Declaration on Human Rights passed. You know, all of these vastly different nation states to agree to this kind of set of rights with all of their cultural backgrounds and variation in religious beliefs and all sorts of things. And whether or not it's true, I don't know, but a woman at the UN in New York said to me, it's because nobody talked about it too much. And while I'm not advocating for people not to talk about things, obviously, I think that this kind of live and let live tolerance, like you mentioned earlier, David, you know, really has to come to the fore, where, you know what, it's okay. Like, I think Bethlehem College has made it clear that they understand other people have a different view on things, but this is their view, and sort of please let them hold it, and everybody can just kind of agree to disagree, perhaps. And like I've talked about in the different conversations I've had with people, including in this podcast here, about identity politics, connecting on our, you know, our shared humanity and all the things we have in common, which is hugely outweighs all of our differences. So that would be my hope, and I think that that's a way forward that really does, I guess, recognize the spirit of tolerance, rather than things just being disguised and packaged as tolerance, but actually being anything but.
Yeah, it's also interesting, I think important to point out that there's nothing that I've heard that suggests that Bethlehem College is not teaching the curriculum appropriately. You know, that I don't think that they've radically changed the biology curriculum as it stands to promote their worldview wholly. I think Bethlehem has a pretty good academic reputation. And so, like Melissa was saying, if families choose to send their kids to a school that has a special character, and we have special character schools, then that's fantastic. It offers them the safe space for their beliefs to flourish at the same time as getting a pretty good education, which we really need in New Zealand.
And I think, going back to your question before, David, around the timing of this, I think time frame of this conversation is really important. As you guys know, I moved to New Zealand 10 years ago, and this piece of legislation only passed 9 years ago in 2013. And so I think we need a little bit of kind of self examination when we're not talking about generations of difference in perspective on what marriage constitutes and the way we should consider these subjects. We're talking 9 years ago, when many of the same members of parliament had this debate and they came to a conclusion. So fair enough, that is now the law of the land, but it's not like to hold this perspective is one of those really unspeakable views that maybe hundreds of years ago we treated things totally differently, and thankfully things have changed since then. We're talking about ourselves here. We're talking about a lot of people who through speech, through discussion, through dialogue have probably changed their opinion on this in 10 years, and some haven't, and they are entirely entitled to that perspective. But it's interesting that things have changed so quickly, and now to even just reference that perspective is getting people in such hot water. One of the aspects, though, that one of the those that are critiquing the speech have raised frequently with us is around where the perspective or the speech for our work of the children relates with that of the parents, and I think that's an interesting point and an important discussion to have as well, where Dr. Darby, you're talking about parental choice there, and that's important, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. It's not saying that the school doesn't have that right, but I think, okay, well, let's have that discussion. Let's consider that perspective. What if a child who identifies with a different gender or who identifies as gay is going into this environment? Their parents subscribe to a more traditional perspective, and so there is a real conflict there. That's a very difficult situation. I'm not going to ask for you to solve that problem in 2 minutes, but kind of what's some of your thoughts on how we navigate that in a tolerance, diverse, pro-free speech way?
Not the way they're trying to solve it now. I mean, I certainly don't have the answers, and I'm sure that that would be a conversation between the child, the parents, of course, and others in the child's life, and the school would need to navigate within all of the various factors that each party brings to the table. And to me that would be rare. Like, one thing that I think has been missing in this, like I said, is a lot of the things in the media have been presented as if this is the only place that every child at Bethlehem College or student at Bethlehem College will be hearing these sorts of views, whereas chances are it's highly likely that a lot of the children there attend a church or obviously come from a Christian home, and therefore it's not new to them, these views. So I think that that's been missing, and there's been just this real attack on the school without consideration of other areas. So that begs the question, of course, if the school's no longer allowed to make that kind of claim, well, at what point does that filter out to others not being able to say that as well? And that's a real concern around fundamentals of a democracy, around freedom of expression and religion and so on. So I think that there could be a really serious ripple effect from this as well. Certainly children or students in the school who are perhaps facing challenges where their way that they feel about themselves doesn't line up with the school would be difficult. And that's a conversation, I think, for families to have primarily, and with the support of the school.
Mm-hmm. And so I hope our viewers kind of hear the theme coming through here. You know, these are complex subjects. We're not trying to pretend like there is only one perspective. Obviously, there's more than one way to view this, and that is why we need free speech. That is why dialogue and reason and persuasion are so crucial. And so that's really what we're standing up for. And you know, thousands and thousands of you have joined us in standing up with our public letter at freetospeak.nz. You can sign that there, and you know, we are using this as a way to say, hey, look, I think most Kiwis, I don't know, I imagine you three agree with me, but I imagine a tradie walking down a street in Christchurch, or a farmer out in the Manawatu, or even, you know, an accountant on his way to work in Auckland, listening to what's going on, and they go, like you said before, Dr. W, a Christian school with a perspective that marriage is between a man and a woman. Sorry, where's the fire? What's the news story here? It must be a really slow news day at the NZ Herald if this is kind of the issue that they're unpacking here, you know? But obviously, for some people, this is a big deal, and let's have that conversation then. But, you know, we hope that, I believe that the vast majority of Kiwis go, hang on a second, this isn't the way we go about it. So I hope you'll join in signing that letter with us. That's www.freetospeak.nz, and we're going to use that as a way to just say, hang on a second, guys, this doesn't need to be the cause for division that we need it to be. And that's kind of what I want to unpack a little bit more, is the division that Annie, the points that you made before were really interesting, just around the way we import a lot of our cultural wars, our culture, the conflicts and our perspectives from the United States. I've just come back from a trip to Europe where I was dialoguing with different free speech partners there. In Europe, in the non-Anglosphere part of the West, they couldn't believe that that universities were shutting us down from speaking. They couldn't believe that academics rated their academic freedom so lowly. They couldn't believe some of the culture conflicts that were happening. They say, you guys are like Canada in the US, you know? So there's a real difference even within the West between the way these these cultural perspectives are playing out. And so how do we go about building that social unity a little bit more? And I think it's an interesting conversation because the government is so intent on social cohesion, which I think is like, arguably, they claim to be, they use that word a lot.
Packaged like that.
They say social cohesion a lot, at the very least. I've always found that term quite bizarre. It's almost like, you know, when you get someone to a mathematician to write about love, maybe, you know, they use all the right terms, but you go, that's not really what we're talking about there, you know. Social cohesion, and you go, what?
It feels vaguely threatening, kind of the same way that be kind feels vaguely threatening now, and you're
I mean, I hope I can sense it feels almost like what the Chinese government would say, you know, like, we're going to have social cohesion on this, and I go, I feel slightly uncomfortable with that.
It sounds like something out of the Soviet Russia or something. I'm sure that they were in quite successfully.
These euphemisms, right, that often mean the opposite of what the word says something, and they're talking about the opposite. So when they're talking about social cohesion, which is the coming together and the cooperation of different perspectives, what they're really saying is there will be one perspective, and I think we should just call that out. That's the troubling thing about hate speech laws. It's saying, yes, everyone will get along really well because everyone will think the same thing, and you go,
that's the fine print.
That is it.
And ultimately,
this is our way or the highway, and you're out if you're not with us. You know, despite the different perspectives held on many subjects, just in this panel here, people who I'm honored to get to work with, free speech enables that diversity. We've discussed that already, but how do we bring that together so we can actually have that that commonality in that belief? I guess we are hoping that people will agree on one thing, and that is we're allowed to disagree and use our speech for that. I'm really concerned about it. I look at the way the US is going, and Canada as well, which is very concerning, some of the social trends that are going there, the division that is occurring, and I go, oh, this is concerning. I don't want my baby boy to grow up in this ever polarized environment. How do we actually
provide some of that. And of course the glib is, well, we allow free speech. But do any of you have ideas on how we can actually practically explore that a bit more? I found your story interesting, Annie, earlier about this friend of yours who disagrees so fundamentally with you, who probably goes to bed praying for you every night, you know?
Probably, yeah.
You know, one of my
That's
best friends.
okay. It's actually, you know what? I know he cares about me. And if he believes that after death I'm going to a not very nice place and he wants to pray about that, then that's nice. We just don't discuss these things, really. We talk about the stuff that we've got in common. And he knows, for example, that I support access to abortion, and I know that he considers that to be, you know, genocide, basically. And we just go, right, those are settled matters. We don't actually need to litigate them over and over again. I've got the I guess, good position of knowing that the law is on my side in that situation. And actually, we don't need to relitigate those things in a friendship setting. Obviously, it depends on the type of relationship you have. If you're working with someone, you have a different type of parameter. And if you're in a situation where you are having to deal with them on that particular issue, then you will have to confront the difficulties and the disagreements. But I think we need to learn that we don't have to take the fight to every person in every relationship. It's like I always feel really sad watching social media, especially like Twitter, around like Christmas or Thanksgiving time in the US, where you see a lot of young people all discussing how they're going to have to deal with these awful bigots at Christmas dinner, and it sounds horrendous. And I think we're living in the most tolerant time, supposedly, in our history. And all of these young people see going home for Christmas or Thanksgiving as if they are going to be engaged in warfare.
Yeah, that they're going to sit down with Himmler and his cronies.
Yeah, like why? What happened to us being able to go, my grandmother is 70 years old, 80 years old, 90 years old. She was born in a different time, say. I'm speaking metaphorically because my grandmother's passed away, but you know, she was born in a different time, and I accept that some of the views she has are reflected of that, and I don't agree with them. Society's moved on. I'm not going to spend Christmas in combat with her over this stuff. And I think it's actually about bringing back individual responsibility for how we interact with each other and when we choose to have conflict over disagreements. And it's also ultimately, I think, unless we are able to find leaders for our countries and our institutions who are brave enough to stand up for having disagreements and shutting down cancel culture and all that kind of thing, we are not going to get anywhere. It comes down to people. It comes down to people's willingness to stand up, and it comes down to our ability to choose to engage with each other in productive ways instead of being locked in combat all the time.
I think those are admirable comments there, Annie. I really like that. So if you're sitting down at your matariki Friday dinner this week, and then there's an uncle or a quarter on the other side of the table that you don't like, have some tolerance. But it's interesting what you're saying there, Annie, around basic respect. And you know, I'm kind of in two minds around respect in the free speech, because I don't think free speech does require you to respect the speech of the other person. You know, a lot of what people have to say, I'm not going to respect that. That is idiotic in my mind, and I'm going to use my speech to counter that. But that's where we have to be able to distinguish the person from the speech. And isn't that so much of the issue, where they've become totally intertwined? For you to hold a perspective on abortion or on the trans issue or on the on fertility from a certain perspective, you are now that view, and I don't agree with that view, so I don't agree with you, and now we are at war. Whereas hopefully in times past, perhaps we've been better at seeing the person as distinct from their perspective. And actually we can then, exactly what you were saying, Dr. Darby, respect the humanity of that person and the things we share in common with them, which vastly outnumber the things that we disagree with them. And that's not to trivialize those differences. Often they may still be significant, but you can separate the perspective or the speech from that person.
I think so. And I think you can find points of connection, that we don't have to all agree on absolutely everything in order to sort of fundamentally get along with each other, at a sort of common decency level, which perhaps it's not so common anymore to have common decency around the place. And I think that a lot of that does play a part that, we all know the role that social media has played in exacerbating a lot of this, because things that you wouldn't necessarily, I think, quite often not say to somebody's face because some of those other social elements kick in, you just say because you don't see the person's reaction. There's less responsibility, I suppose, that comes with what you're saying. But, gosh, I've spoken a lot, and I know Annie's a fan as well of Martin Luther King, and you look at the way that he spoke and the kind of widening of the circle and the way that he spoke about people who he had every reason in many respects to really dislike, he didn't. And he, was able to draw them in and to connect with people who really hated him, obviously, as well, in a way that helped him to achieve his aim of a sort of more truly tolerant and truly inclusive society, which isn't what we're seeing now. Like, it's ironic, really, that the words, for people who are so opposed to speech, they've been very clever at using speech in a way that sort of manipulates and packages things in quite a deceitful or disingenuous way in many instances. But I agree. I think it's about finding ways that we can connect with one another, time and a place, pick your battles. Really, are you really that surprised that this Christian school holds these views? They do a lot of good. A lot of families I know send their children there, like you mentioned, David, not because necessarily of their Christian values, but because they do produce some pretty good academic outcomes, and we're in need of that in New Zealand. So can we not just wipe them off entirely? They could make a difference in a lot of kids' lives, and I think that's something to be said for that. Put it the same.
Well,
I also think that the tactics of going after Bethlehem so publicly and so aggressively, and all the letters and petitions and calling for inquiries and so aggressive, it might just be me, but my reaction to something like that is to dig my heels in and to raise my hands and to say, bring it on. Whereas if you come to me, in a slightly more subtle, private manner and say, there's a few things here I'd like to discuss with you, I'll be far more open to the conversation. It's pick your battles and your tools or weapons, if you want to call them that.
Exactly. And my understanding is it's not a new belief that Bethlehem College has. I think it was more a point of clarification in 2019, given other changes in society, and them saying, well, actually, hey, we know that this is a common viewpoint, but actually we still have this view, which is a sort of pretty standard Christian view in many respects.
Well, and it makes sense why in between 1999 and 2019 a clarification was needed, right?
Yes.
Major social changes have occurred since then. It's fair enough to say we're going to actually just put something on the table here.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they have a right to do that. And if it's not for you, like I said, go to another school. Simple as that. And plenty of schools, I think, are out there to meet a diverse range of needs in our community. But you have to let people have that choice, I think.
I also wonder about the degree to which this has been blown out of proportion, how I would view it if I don't have a child yet, but if I was choosing to send them to a school, I wouldn't expect that they would be speaking about sexual orientation 5 times a day. I would think it might come up in their health and relationships class at some point, and they'd do a module and you'd learn that actually, there's different ways that families are made, and there's, different sexualities and all those kind of things. And so you'd expect that in that time, a Christian school might say, well, look, the law says this, but it is our belief that according to the Bible and our religion, actually marriage is just between a man and a woman. And so that's when it comes up. But the way this is being framed by the activists is like there's someone with a stick beating the gay kids as they walk in the gate every morning, and they're screamed at in every class, you know, and so you kind of go, well, what are we talking about here? What is the actual issue here? Is there, you know, a campaign of horrid behaviour against every child who's gay or gender non-conforming and goes to the school? Or is it that the school, in a very selective moment in the education process, which is like the act of teaching families and relationships, they say, our political and religious view is this. In which case, that child, presumably who is a teenager, has the entire rest of society as a reference to say, okay, so that's what they think, but actually everyone else says X. Yeah. You know, and they can make their own decision there, right? Like, it's, to me, it just feels like this is a disingenuous thing, because it's being made like it's an assault on people like me. And I went to Catholic schools until I was about 13, and then I went to a state school. And I don't remember us talking that much about sexuality, but that was last century or something, you know. And so I do think, how much do we need to talk about this? How much does it need to be an issue? And how much is this, just like I say, a political stick?
But to strongman the argument, though, I think that what I saw was there was an attack on this statement of principles that parents had to sign, which was not, we agree, it's just we understand that this school has these beliefs,
Exactly.
which, as far as I could see, are totally uncontroversial for a Christian school. Not that I have a great deep theological knowledge, but there was also, and this is to strongman the opposition, there were also allegations of actual abuse in the school that came out, and I think if there are, then they need to be investigated. I don't think that should be tolerated at all. That's a completely different kettle of fish.
Absolutely.
And we should distinguish between that and what it started as, I think, at least this round, which was the statement of beliefs, which is a statement of beliefs of a special character school that's entitled to their belief and to state it.
And the school should be absolutely expected to treat every child with dignity and in accordance with human rights and the laws of the land, even if they have this, you know, they've got this belief system. There is absolutely no way that then translates to them being able to mistreat children, students who might be gay or might question their gender.
Absolutely.
And that distinction does need to be made. So thank you for making that clear, David, because I really think that we should be able to make that distinction and say that while a school might have X belief, it doesn't mean that the rights of the child that exist outside of that are going to be allowed to be mitigated in any way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But and to kind of bridge those two perspectives, discriminating, it is not discriminating to present a certain perspective, because I think some people would jump on that and go, exactly, that's what we're talking about, and they are teaching that that their perspective of gender is invalid. And that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about actions, not ideas, right? And so that's the tension here is, of course, actions off the table, but then ideas are not abuse either, and I think we want to.
It's so complex, right? It's so complex, and this is what's so upsetting, I guess, is when I think about young people who, like I was when I was hiding in the closet, and you are so afraid of, well, I was at the time, of what the world will think of you. And so for adults to be fostering this idea of hostility that actually we've worked a lot through as a society, I think is harmful to those children who should be able to know that regardless of religious difference and stuff, New Zealand is a safe place for them to be gay, for example. It is possibly one of the safest places ever in the history of the world to be gay. And so to give them the misconception that a policy like that is putting them in danger is actually wrong. It's completely wrong to do that to the child, to give them that anxiety.
I'm just going to keep on banging my drum here then and say if our viewers are enjoying this conversation, go to freetospeak.nz, or if you agree with what we're saying even more, go to freetospeak.nz and donate. But this is what we are standing up for, is a conversation, is the right to have that dialogue, is the right to disagree. Dr. Cumin, I want to come to you as we draw to a close now and just say, what do you want to see come out of this? You know, we are lining up to stand by Bethlehem College and any institution, any integrated school's perspective on marriage, and say, we will stand by your right to have that speech, to make that expression. There are others that are lining up going, we will not rest until we see this scratched out, until we see that speech like this is no longer allowed. And if we would take it down to numbers, freetospeak.nz right now is the largest endorsed public statement in the country on this issue at the moment. We are about twice the size of any endorsed statement against it. But that's not actually resolving the issue. What do we need to do to actually resolve this issue? And what does a victory look like for free speech lovers in this issue?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad to hear there's the numbers, but I don't think that should be the story at all. You know, even if there are only us four on this call standing up for it, it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
In an ideal world, I think Annie hit the nail on the head when she said it takes leadership. I would like to see our elected representatives and those who are legislated to stand up for human rights in this country, and those that have taken on that burden either willingly or as a job to actually do their job, to stand up, to be mature about this whole thing, to say we have special character schools up and down the country that do, by and large, very good work. They teach the national curriculum as they should. They each have their own special character because of their beliefs. This is one of those schools. They're entitled to it, and the bullies can sit down.
I agree. I would hope that that's exactly what our elected officials will do. I don't know. I don't hold out a lot of hope, to be honest, and I don't want to finish on a down note about it. But I think, you know, when you put this, Annie, I think maybe said earlier, or Jonathan, around the extent to which schools should be discussing some of this stuff. And again, I come back to the role of families in this. And also, when you look at it in the wider context of other, like the recent new Ministry of Education guidelines around relationships and sexuality, they're coming at an increasingly younger age for children. There'd be a lot of people who wouldn't think that's appropriate. And I know you mentioned that before around certain conversations with children who really are too young to understand a lot of the wider implications of some of this stuff. When you look at different legislation that's just been passed, the attack on Bethlehem College, it sort of fits into this wider picture. So I would hope that everyone can just pause for a bit. We can just have some conversations about this, because otherwise, like you said, Annie, we could end up in a place where some of these things in the States and so on have been put into practice. They're further down the track. There's been a whole host of unintended consequences and things aren't looking too good. So I think that we need to have these really crucial conversations, not to the point where we're necessarily all going to agree with one another. I don't think that's quite creepy. I don't think there's anything particularly healthy about that, but rather where we can say, you know what, that's your view, and on marriage, on whatever it might be, this is mine, but we can still live together in this great country, in this place, and at a time that we've never had more freedoms and more rights to be who we are. But we need to extend that to everybody in the mix. It doesn't seem right to me that there's one group saying, we want these rights and we want these protections, but we're not prepared to grant that to others in the mix as well. That's not going to end well.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and especially for the three others joining in this conversation today. I think hopefully this has been a really positive example of people who disagree on quite a few different issues, who may or may not like each other even, but who actually are able. It's a great crew.
I love these guys.
Who are able to Agree to disagree, and you know, we have some very heated conversations at times, but at the end of the day, Melissa, you've banged it on the head there. It's saying, well, I'm actually going to afford to others the rights I expect for myself. And at the end of that public letter that we're asking our supporters to sign at freetospeak.nz, that's what we say. We expect if others are expecting the right to speech, they should be able to extend that to everyone who will hold a perspective. And so we say kia kaha, Bethlehem College. We think that you guys are under a lot of pressure right now, and not taking into account the substance of the speech, we absolutely stand with their right to make these statements. We think every special character school, every institution, every individual in New Zealand has free speech. It is one of the greatest liberties that humanity's ever known. And while the Free Speech Union is around, we will keep standing up for your free speech. So thank you all for the conversation tonight. Thank you to our listeners, and we'll catch you next time.